The Grand Synod of the Ethelgardian Empire did not scream when the anomaly appeared. They did not panic, nor did they scramble the fleets in a chaotic frenzy of fear, for they were the masters of the Cygnus Arm, the architects of the Starlight Lattice, and the inheritors of 1,000,000,000 years of stellar refinement. Instead, the High Chamber, a colossal dome of translucent, singing crystal suspended in the upper atmosphere of their capital world, fell into a heavy, contemplative silence, the kind of silence that precedes a judgment of execution. The atmosphere within the chamber was thick with the scent of ozone and the pheromones of high anxiety, masked poorly by the sterile filtration systems that hummed beneath the floor, maintaining the precise mixture of gases required for the Ethelgardian physiology. They were tall, slender beings, their skin the color of polished obsidian, draped in robes of shifting light that reflected their emotional states, though now almost every robe in the grand amphitheater had turned a dull, muted gray of uncertainty and disdain. In the center of the room, projected by the hololithic emitters that drew power directly from the planet's magnetic field, hung the image of the intruder, a vessel that had dropped out of superluminal space with the grace of a falling stone, defying the elegant physics of warp dynamics that the Ethelgardians held as sacred scripture. It sat there in the vacuum at the edge of their home system, motionless, ugly, and inexplicably dense. High Archon Xylthos, his cranial ridges throbbing with a mixture of headache and annoyance, gestured with a four-fingered hand toward the projection, his voice resonating through the crystalline acoustics of the chamber with a tone of practiced mockery that hid his underlying unease. He looked down upon the assembly of generals, scientists, and diplomats, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the crude geometry of the human vessel. It was a block. There were no sweeping curves, no nacelles glowing with the Cherenkov radiation of refined antimatter, no solar sails catching the photon streams of the local star, and no evidence of the intricate fractal plating that characterized the ships of the civilized races. It was a perfect, featureless rectangular prism of matte black material, scarred and pitted by micrometeoroids, resembling nothing so much as a brick thrown through a window of delicate glass. To the Ethelgardians, who believed that function followed form and that ugliness was a symptom of moral failing, the ship was an affront to the senses, a primitive artifact that had no business traversing the dark void between the stars. It looked heavy, dead, and morbid. "A coffin," Xylthos declared, the word dripping with venomous amusement, causing a ripple of laughter to spread through the lower tiers of the Synod where the fleet admirals sat in their shimmering armor. "The primitives have finally achieved faster-than-light travel, and they send us a coffin to announce their arrival. Is this a diplomatic envoy, or have they simply launched a funeral barge into the wrong sector?" The laughter grew louder, a release of tension that had been building since the sensors first detected the displacement of mass at the system's edge. But General Vorn, a scarred veteran of the border wars with the silicate hives, did not laugh. He stared intently at the telemetry scrolling rapidly alongside the image of the human vessel, his mandibles clicking softly in a rhythm of calculation. The sensor readings were nonsensical. The mass of the object was immense, far too heavy for its size, suggesting a density that approached that of a neutron star, yet it possessed no gravitational pull that would tear the nearby moons apart. It was an impossible object, a paradox wrapped in a shell of carbon and misery. "It hails us, Archon," the communications overseer announced, her voice trembling slightly as she interfaced with the crude, broadband radio signal that was washing over their sophisticated comms array like a wave of static mud. "Audio only, no visual. The carrier wave is archaic analog modulation over a subspace carrier. It is painfully loud." Xylthos waved a dismissive hand, signaling for the audio to be played, expecting the guttural grunts of a savage or the desperate pleading of a lost explorer. Instead, the voice that filled the crystalline chamber was calm, synthetic, and devoid of fear, speaking in the trade tongue of the galactic rim, a language the humans had likely scraped from the wreckage of some unfortunate probe centuries ago. The voice did not sound like a conqueror, nor did it sound like a supplicant. It sounded like a machine reading a prepared statement from a very long distance away. "This is the United Terran vessel Endurance," the voice intoned, flat and resonant, echoing off the high vaulted ceiling of the Synod. "We are traversing this sector on a trajectory toward the galactic core. We have no quarrel with you. Hegemony, we request only passage and the right to recharge our capacitors from the heliopause of your star. We will not enter your inner system. We will not land. We will be gone within 3 standard rotations. Do not engage. The transmission ended with a sharp click, followed by the hiss of background radiation. Xylthos stared at the blank space where a face should have been, his pride stung by the brevity and the presumption of the request. They did not ask for an audience. They did not bring gifts. They did not grovel before the masters of the Cygnus arm. They simply stated their intent and demanded non-interference, as if the Ethelgardian Empire were merely a topographical obstacle to be stepped over. Arrogance, Xylthos hissed, his robe flaring a crimson red of anger. They fly a brick through our sovereign space, a vessel that looks like a tomb for their dead gods, and they demand we sit idly by while they leech energy from our sun. They insult our aesthetics, our borders, and our dignity. He turned to General Vorn, who was still studying the readouts with a growing frown. General, what is the analysis of their weaponry? Do they possess particle lances, singularity projectors, kinetic rails? Vorn hesitated, his fingers dancing over the holographic interface, trying to make sense of the void where data should be. Can the sensors detect? Nothing, Vorn admitted, his voice low. No weapon ports, no shield emitters, no energy signatures consistent with offensive capabilities. It is simply a solid block of high-density matter. It is a coffin, as you said, a heavy, blind, deaf coffin floating in the dark. If we engage, it will be like shooting a rock. The confidence in the room surged. The fear evaporated completely, replaced by the predatory instinct of a superior species faced with a helpless inferior. If the humans had no weapons and no shields, then this was not a negotiation. It was a target practice. It was an opportunity to show the galaxy that the Ethelgardian borders were inviolate, that even the ugly and the primitive could not trespass without paying the blood price. Burn it, Xylthos ordered, leaning back into his gravity couch, a cruel smile touching his lips. Let the Armada use it for calibration. Show them the elegance of Ethelgardian warfare. Vaporize that eyesore and send the debris back to whatever mudball they crawled out of. The order was relayed instantly, traveling at the speed of light to the fleet stationed at the perimeter, a glorious formation of sleek golden warships that moved like schools of predatory fish. The Ethelgardian captains, eager for glory and amused by the target, brought their vessels around, their graceful, curved hulls catching the light of the local star. They did not bother with formation tactics. They simply lined up, their plasma lances charging with a high-pitched whine that vibrated through the hulls of their ships. On the bridge of the flagship Sovereign Light, Admiral Kales watched the black brick on his main view screen, shaking his head in disbelief. Target lock confirmed, his tactical officer reported. Shields are down on the target. In fact, they never raised them. Kales chuckled. Mercy is for the beautiful, he muttered, quoting the ancient scriptures. Fire! The command unleashed a torrent of energy that could have boiled an ocean. Beams of coherent plasma, focused by gravimetric lenses, lashed out across the void, striking the side of the human vessel with the force of 1,000 nuclear detonations. The Synod watched on the main projection, expecting the flash of destruction, the shattering of the hull, the scattering of debris. The screen turned white with the intensity of the impact, the energy washing over the Endurance in a blinding storm of fire and radiation. But when the light faded, the silence in the Grand Synod returned, heavier and colder than before. The Endurance was still there. It had not moved. It had not shattered. The black material of its hull was not even glowing from the heat. The plasma beams had struck it and simply vanished. There was no dissipation, no reflection, no explosion of kinetic transfer. The energy had been absorbed, swallowed whole by the matte black surface as if the ship were a hole in the universe itself. The telemetry on General Vorn's console spiked, not with damage reports, but with a frantic, confusing reading that made no sense to Ethelgardian physics. The mass of the human ship had increased. It had taken the energy of the attack and converted it directly into density, grounding the violence into its own structure. Report, Xylthos shouted, standing up, his robes shifting to a panicked violet. Why is it still there? Did we miss? General Vorn was pale, his mandibles trembling. We hit it, Archon. We hit it with enough firepower to crack a moon. The energy. It drank it. The hull material is hyperabsorbent. It's not just armor, it's a thermodynamic sink. On the screen, the Endurance remained motionless, a dark monolith against the stars, indifferent to the might of the Empire. Then, for the first time, the block changed. A hairline fracture appeared along the center of the rectangular prism, a thin line of pure white light that cut through the darkness of the hull. It was not a breach, it was an opening. They are hailing us again, the communications overseer whispered, her voice barely audible. The signal is stronger this time, digital, high bandwidth. The voice returned, no longer sounding like a recording. It was tired, heavy with a weight that the Ethelgardians could not comprehend. "We warned you," the human voice said. "We are not a warship. We do not carry weapons because we do not have room for them. You called our vessel a coffin. You were more right than you knew. But it is not for us." The line of light on the ship expanded, the two halves of the massive block sliding apart with a slowness that implied immense weight. From within the Endurance, there was no gleam of missiles or the glow of lasers. There was only darkness, a darkness deeper than the void around it, a swirling, oily blackness that seemed to rotate and churn. It's a singularity, Vorn realized, his eyes widening in horror as he looked at the gravitational readings. They aren't shielding themselves with armor, they are shielding the universe from what they are carrying. The Endurance had opened its outer shell to reveal the core, a contained, stable event horizon, a fragment of a black hole harnessed and caged within the ship's structure. The humans were not using it for propulsion. They were using it as a garbage disposal for energy. And now, having been attacked, they were venting the excess. "Reverse fleet!" Kaylee screamed on the bridge of the Sovereign Light, but it was too late. The Endurance did not fire a beam, it simply pulsed. The gravity well it had been containing was allowed to leak, just for a microsecond, directed outward toward the attacking fleet. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a distortion of space-time, a ripple of pure force. The Ethel Guardian ships, designed for elegance and speed, relied on inertial dampeners and delicate gravitational stabilizers. The pulse hit them like a hurricane hitting a house of cards. The beautiful, golden hulls did not explode. They crumpled. The front of the Sovereign Light was pulled toward the back of the ship, the vessel imploding in on itself as the localized gravity sheared the molecular bonds of the alloy. In the Synod chamber, the Archon and his council watched in paralyzed horror as their glorious Armada was crushed into scrap metal without a single shot being fired by the humans. The ships were twisted, flattened, and spun away into the dark, their crews silenced in an instant. The Endurance closed its shell, the line of light vanishing, returning to its form as a solid, inert brick. The sensor readings normalized. The mass stabilized. The ship began to move again, slowly accelerating on its original trajectory toward the star, ignoring the wreckage of the fleet that drifted in its wake. "Hail them," Zalthos whispered, falling back into his seat, his arrogance shattered into dust. "Beg them to stop, find out what they are." The screen flickered, and for the first time a visual appeared. It was the bridge of the human ship. It was utilitarian, cramped, and dim. Wires hung from the ceiling, panels were rusted. The crew looked exhausted, their uniforms patched and gray. They did not look like conquerors, they looked like refugees. The captain, a man with gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world, stared out at the Ethel Guardian High Council. He did not gloat, he looked sad. "This is Captain Holloway," the human said. "Your attack forced us to vent the containment field. We regret the loss of life. We told you we were not a threat, we are a transport." Archon Zalthos stammered, his diplomatic training failing him. "Transport? You possess the power of a collapsing star. You crushed our fleet as if it were nothing. What kind of monster builds a ship like that just to transport cargo? What are you carrying that requires such defense?" Holloway looked down at his console, then back at the aliens, a look of profound pity on his face. "We aren't carrying cargo, Archon. We are carrying the archives, the genetic samples, the history of Earth, the last terabytes of our culture." He paused, and the silence in the Synod was absolute. "We don't build ships like this because we want to rule the galaxy. We build them because where we come from, the stars are going out. We are fleeing the silence. The coffin isn't to bury us. It's to keep us alive against the entropy that is chasing us." The revelation struck the council harder than the gravity pulse. The humans were not an invasion force. They were survivors. They had weaponized their own survival mechanisms because the universe they inhabited was far more hostile than the petty political games of the Ethel Guardian Empire. The blocky, ugly ship was built to survive the death of the universe, and the Ethel Guardians had thrown firecrackers at it. "We are entering your heliopause now," Holloway continued, his voice heavy. "We will take the solar energy we need to reinforce the singularity containment, and then we will leave. If you wish to follow us, you cannot. Where we are going, your ships would shatter. Your elegance is a weakness in the deep dark. Only the dense survive." The screen went black, cutting the connection. Zalthos sat in the silence of the beautiful, singing chamber, looking at the debris of his fleet, realizing for the first time that the universe was not a place of art and beauty, but a cold, hard place where function was the only god that mattered. The humans, in their ugly, invincible coffin, understood this. And as the Endurance drifted toward their sun, a dark speck against the blinding light, the High Archon felt a chill that no environmental suit could warm. He realized they had mocked the humans for building a coffin. never understanding that the humans had built it not for themselves, but for the hope that something, anything, would survive the long night that was coming for them all.